Hello, better readers. I'm Madeleine Ryan. I'm the author of A Room Called Earth, which is this book here, the cover of which I adore. I think it's like a little treasure chest, and there's even some gold leaf on it and things like that. I find it a very magical cover, and I'd like to think it's a magical cover because it's a magical little book. So thank you all for being here. And thank you, Better Reading, for having me on this event for my first book. I've got my candles burning in the background. The scent is getting quite intense because I lit two because I thought that would kind of be a bit more atmospheric or something, but now it's getting a little bit full on. There's lots of mimosa and all sorts of things circulating around the room, but I think maybe it'll sort of lull me into a very romantic, intimate space with you this evening. It's a super moody night actually here. It's raining outside. It's been quite a cool day, very autumnal. So yeah, it's lovely to be here with you all tonight. And I've got my tea and my water. I already had a snack. Usually I'd sort of nibble on dark chocolate while I'm having my tea, but I've just got the tea now. The chocolate's gone. But yes, so this book, A Room Called Earth. I can see. Thank you, Meredith, who's congratulated me on the book. Lovely. Yes, I look forward to you reading it as well. I love the sense of, I don't know, I feel like as a book is being shared with the world, it seems to kind of evolve and grow as each person reads and has an experience of it, and all the different kinds of feedback that I get seems to expand the universe of the story in some way. So I so appreciate you all for looking forward to reading it or whatever and having your own experience with it, because in many ways the book is a real celebration of the individual experience as a universal experience, because it takes place over one night inside the mind. So it's all in first person, inside the mind of this dynamic, honest, sensual, contradictory kind of, I think she's just astonishing young woman, as she prepares herself to go to a party in Melbourne on Christmas Eve. And she kind of goes through all her self-care rituals, and she has a very loyal cat companion called Pork Chop, who I guess makes a kind of appearance on the cover here. And I've got a couple of cats in the space with me actually, who you can't see, who are at the moment kind of quietly sleeping. That could change. 8 o'clock is usually their dinner time, so there could be some meowing, but we'll see how we go. Anyway, back to the book. So yes, it takes place over one night inside the mind of this magnificent woman as she's getting ready to go to a party. And then she goes to the party, and it's kind of this beautiful, like that experience of being in your own space and getting ready for something like that, and then entering into a social environment, and how drastically that kind of changes our sense of our environment and things. And she encounters all kinds of different people. She leaves the party, she goes for this walk, she returns, and then, she's kind of contemplating leaving when she meets this nice guy, and it's kind of like the first time a sort of a slightly deeper connection occurs. And I find that quite miraculous when we manage to connect with one another, given all of the different thoughts and feelings and experiences and memories and sensations we bring into any given experience. I think it's a really beautiful thing when our stars collide. So her stars collide somewhat with a nice guy at the party, and then she kind of invites him back into her world, and we get a new perspective of her world, because obviously we've been seeing it all through her focus and where she puts her attention. But when he enters into it, we get his questions and kind of his observations about who she is, and it sort of opens up our understanding of her, which I think is kind of what we do for each other in a beautiful way as well. We sort of open up an understanding of who we are. Our focus might be on one thing, or stressing about one thing about ourselves or about others, and then other people can kind of open up our awareness or shake us in some way, which I think is very, very powerful. And the book is very much a celebration of that process. I can see a few other comments. Hello, everybody. Tracy, hello. Thank you for the congrats. You love the cover. Me too. the publisher was so sensitive with this book. Like, I cannot even tell you. They were communicating with me at every point of the development of this beautiful creature. And it's got these like lovely flaps as well. Look at that. And then the little pictures. And it's just like a gift that keeps giving. Every time I look at it, I keep seeing new things, like the natives and the crystals and the martinis, all of which are part of the story naturally and thematically appropriate. Patricia, thank you so much. Yes, I love the title as well. Yeah, I've got an interesting story about that. I'll come back to that, but thank you, Better Reading, for welcoming everyone. Hello, Jane. Hello, Michael. Yes, the cat does play a big role in the book, in the sense that, I mean, she obviously doesn't take him to the party with her, but when it comes to her relationship to herself and her immediate environment at home, he's an integral part of that. I'm very much of the belief that animals kind of invite us into this beautiful, non-verbal state of intimacy with ourselves and our environment, whether it's at home or it's in the outdoors. And I find that relationship to be very sacred. So her connection with Pork Chop plays a huge part, even if he's only sort of featured in her space. Yeah, he's a very grounding influence upon her. He's sort of like an all-seeing eye, which is very much reflected in the cover again. I remember when the publisher sort of said to me, when we were first starting to think about the cover, and the designer, Alison Colpoys, apparently sort of was like, you know, I'm seeing Pork Chop on a plinth. And I was like, yes, there's something so kind of, is it omnipresent about a cat's gaze, and particularly this cat's gaze. I mean, those eyeballs are pink. I don't know if you can see that, but that's one seriously magical cat, as Pork Chop in the book is, as all cats are. So yeah. Hello, Wendy. Yes. Looking for yes. Well, I'll tell you about the title. I'll just say hello to everybody else. Joe. Yes. Thank you, Michael. A street cat named Bob. I don't think I've seen that movie, but I'm pretty sure the poster has a ginger cat as well. So there you go. There's something about ginger cats. Although the cat's with me now, there's a ragdoll cat who's a big sort of fluff ball, and a black cat kind of slinking around somewhere. So I like cats. I also live with a dog, a greyhound, who's gorgeous. But this book is, you know, there's even a conversation between two of the characters where, you know, he says to her, like, are you a cat person? And she's like, I'm not a cat person. It's just that my life has aligned with the soul and the life of this creature at this time. So for this period of my life where the cat has chosen me and to be with me, and I have chosen to spend time with this cat, I am a cat person. But, you know, I think animals bring out all different parts of who we are. So, you know, Pork Chop is bringing out a certain aspect of who she is at this point in her life, where we find her on Christmas Eve. Hello, Helen. Yes, great cover. Look forward to reading something new. Yay, I know. Isn't Pork Chop a funny name? It was just Pork Chop right from the start. You know, this book was such an adventure in the sense that it kept revealing itself to me. I'd sort of created all this space in my life in lots of different ways, and I basically heard sort of the voice of the protagonist one night, the first lines of the story. And as she kept talking, Pork Chop was just like the next sort of thing to come up straight away. So he was right there from the start, right from the first moments of writing it. He was there. And it was Pork Chop. It was this big ginger cat called Pork Chop. So there you go. Yes. So thank you, Meredith. Yes, I know, right? Greyhounds are pretty special. There are so many special animals. There aren't enough books in the world to encompass how many amazing animals there are on this planet. Yeah. So yes, I agree. Maybe greyhounds are a whole nother thing, which is pretty fascinating. Let's see. Yes. No, she's not thinking of eating the cat. You see, though the book itself doesn't have any kind of labels, she's very interested in just eating plants, like being plant-based or vegan. And there are many themes in the book which aren't ever explicitly stated, like veganism, like mysticism, like colonialism, like sexism, like feminism, lots of isms, environmentalism, autism, that are central themes of the book. But I find that labels can become quite heavy-handed, and we all bring our own sort of assumptions and judgments to those various words or labels and categories, and then that can kind of create, whether we intend it to or not, this sort of barrier between us and like the nuances of the humanity that's actually underneath the labels. So, you know, when she's exploring the idea of what she's going to eat later tonight, she's just sort of salivating about the idea of the sandwich she's going to make and the bread she's going to use and the avocado she's going to mash and like how she's going to melt the, you know, the almond cheese. And that's how the veganism technically comes out. But it's just her experience of herself and her life and what she likes. It sort of never made sense to apply the labels in that regard. Every time I kind of did that, I got the sense she was like, no, that's too heavy, that's too much, which was then an interesting process when it came to actually sharing the book with the world. And obviously she's autistic, as I am autistic, neurodiverse, and I was diagnosed in the process of writing the book, but I'd actually already started writing it. And so then figuring out how to address that aspect of her psyche, because obviously we're inside her mind the entire time, and how to share it with the world, but also given that the book doesn't have any labels was, it was quite an adventure to go on. But yes, so that's heaps about the book and the process. Let's see what else. Hello, Lynn. Oh, yes, okay, I need to get to the title. A few of you have asked about the title. So the title is an interesting story and has a nice symmetry with today and tonight with you, actually, because it was the first day of my period. I'd already been writing the book, but the first day of my period has often been quite painful. I get terrible cramps. And today is the first day of my period as well. Maybe too much information, but at the same time, there is symmetry. It is creatively justified to explain this to you. I was in so much pain. I was almost delirious. Like when I look back on the last sort of 4 or 5 years of my life, this particular day was probably the most painful day I'd had. I was trying everything. I was taking magnesium. I was having baths. I was doing everything to try and like unlock my body. And I went outside after having a bath and lay on the grass and was like, okay, like, and I looked up at the sky. And I was looking at the trees, might have felt a bit dizzy. I'm having a memory of it feeling a little bit disorienting. And I felt like I was in a room when I was outside. And I was like, oh my God, I'm in a room called Earth. It was this very visceral, very trippy experience. And then I was like, I think this is the title of the book. Like, I can't remember how many words in I was, but it was just like, there's something about the parallels between the rooms of our minds, the rooms in our houses, and feeling like the earth is actually a room that we come into for a period of time and then leave and maybe go into another room that we might have been into before, but we don't know. Or we might have never been into, but it's an adventure. Just that idea of existence as a series of rooms and our minds as being filled with rooms. But then she also literally travels through quite a few rooms, going from her own space to the party. It's a house party. So she meets different people and each relationship is almost like a room. There's just rooms. Life is rooms and experiencing ourselves in different rooms, basically. So, that was how the title kind of unfolded and became a bit of an anchor in the writing process. It was like I was constantly checking in to be like, which room is this? You know, or this is the room where she's in front of a mirror kind of observing her body. And then this is the room where she's developing intimacy with this guy. And then this is the room where she's, you know, in the mud, you know, for various reasons, experiencing herself in a certain way. And so it was like a constant unfolding process then, that idea of being in a room and life being a room and the earth being a room. So, Jane, I see a question from you. Was writing this book your first exploration into your own neurodiversity? Did you suspect autism, or did writing the book lead you to diagnosis? Well, actually, a few years before writing the book and getting the diagnosis, I was friends with two beautiful women who I would spend weekends with, or days with on the weekends, sort of eating and chatting and sitting amongst their salt lamps, and we'd have this beautiful time. And it was one of the first times in my life that I'd found myself being able to talk with others for hours and not feel completely wrecked at the end of it. And I was like, wow, and I said to them, gosh, why, like, this is the most beautiful thing. Like, I can't really do this with many other people, or maybe anyone, except for you. And they kind of looked at me and said, well, Madeleine, maybe that's because you're autistic like we are, and you process information and communication in the same way. So when we're together, it's easier. And I was like, what? I had no idea how to make sense of that. I didn't have a problem with it. I was just like, I don't know what the ramifications of that are. I don't really know what it means, but okay, maybe it's a thing. But I sort of blocked it out for a while. And then sort of fast forward a few years, I've made a lot of changes in my life. I start writing this book. I start hearing the protagonist's voice. Few months into that, again, my family and I kind of had a falling out in our communication together. I guess it was kind of about different, I can't even really remember what it was about. Those things can often be, it's like, what were we even, what was that? But essentially, I think it was about different ideas of social expectations or ways to communicate that were appropriate or something, and during it, because we just couldn't seem to hear one another, I kind of said, look, there might be something about, to do with the fact that I think I'm autistic, and maybe that's part of what's going on here. And they were like, what? You're what? You might be what? And I was like, yeah. So I don't know, maybe that's something we could explore. And so then we decided to go through the official sort of diagnostic assessment process as a family, because that's something that you do sort of, or at least the one I went through, which was grueling, was with family and, my partner and the whole thing. So, yeah, and I was already 6 months into writing the book though. And then, so fast forward another few months, I kind of was sitting outside one day, I think with a cup of tea, of course, or a cup of coffee, as I often am when I'm sitting outside. And I was reflecting on the fact that the book is all in the first person. And I was like, well, if she's, processing her experiences, like if I'm harnessing the way that I process experiences and applying that framework to the way she analyzes, other people or the interactions that she has, or the way that, she processes different information or stimulus that's coming in. And if I'm using kind of the structure of how I do that and applying that to her, and if I've just been told that the structure of how I do that is neurodiverse, then is she neurodiverse? And my whole body was just like, yes. And I felt so like she'd chosen me, and like this creature that I'd sort of been birthing in a way for months already. It was like she'd chosen me because of that. And it was just this very gentle but also very powerful sort of moment of realization about the story, but also about myself and my relationship with her, because she's really helped me to embrace and accept what it means to be neurodiverse in this very kind of dynamic and empowering way. And, I have written a lot of articles about, that process and about autism, but overall writing her and going through what I did with her has been the most illuminating experience about what that means. And I would like to think that then reading the book can be an illuminating experience in that way too. And I have a belief, I'm sure you've got lots of beautiful comments and questions, but just on that, one more note on that about neurodiversity, which I think is a very interesting thing when it comes to storytelling and as a storytelling device, is that I have a belief that neurodiverse people And autistic people obviously are kind of like the heightened sensitivities of everybody else, but magnified, and we're very conscious of the things that overwhelm us or that aren't working properly, and how to make patterns that make sense, and all kinds of things that lots of people will skim over in the name of fitting in, or moving through their to-do list and not thinking about other things too much, sort of just getting on with their day. But the neurodiverse person can't actually function unless these things are, like, the environment is made calmer, or things are explained slowly, or that the world sort of has to slow down in a sense for a neurodiverse person. But when it does, it has this habit of freeing things up for everybody. So it's rare that I've found when I'm like, oh, I'm just feeling really overwhelmed in this situation. Other people will often be like, yeah, well, me too, but we'll just get on with it. And then it's like, well, maybe we'd all benefit from slowing down and acknowledging this and making changes. It's just that the neurodiverse person is kind of like the catalyst for that. So as a protagonist, then I would like to think that anything that she reflects on, or processes or struggles with, is something that many different kinds of, sorry, my cat's meowing, there's a little cameo appearance there from Zero, that can illuminate things for all kinds of different people just through her being honest about those aspects of who she is. So yeah, that's a big neurodiversity exploration / spiel. But oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, this one's a showstopper. Sorry, everybody. She's going to click on something. I just know it. Then I'll disappear and I'll have to come back in a poof of glitter, dramatically. But no, she's bored now. Anyway, let's have a look. What else are you saying? Hello, Mel. What compelled me to start writing the book? Well, what compelled me? I grew up in a house with journalists, and I did study literature and creative writing at uni. I mean, I would say by accident, but I was kind of just drawn to subjects that didn't have exams. I never thought of myself as a writer, even though I journaled madly as a child and as a teenager, and my parents were sort of writing all the time, obviously, and the house was filled with books. I was like, no, I'm an actress. I'm born to be the thing that, my parents are watching and analyzing, on stage or because they're critics. My father's a film critic and my mother's a TV critic. So, it was sort of, I think, something else going on there to do with being seen and expressing myself in that way, which I did for years. I went to acting school as well, and I did lots of theatre, and I think that was an incredible rite of passage. I think acting is just an incredible rite of passage for just about anybody to explore. But then eventually I got to this place where, I'd met my partner, and he'd sort of on a whim said, let's move out of the city. And I was like, yes, because I'd grown up in Melbourne, which is where the book is also set. It's very much a love note to Melbourne and to the parties that happen in Melbourne and to summer in the city and all of the things. Anyway, that's a side note. And moving away from the city, in a sense, gave me a greater appreciation of it, because I think I'd just become inundated. I every day was just sort of filled with so many things and so much stimulus. So moving away from the city was really powerful in itself. And then we kind of adopted animals. We started eating plant-based, both of us. I stopped taking the hormonal birth control pill, which had a huge impact on my mind and my body and my moods and everything. And I found myself drawn to writing, which I'd always found very freeing and fluid and a sort of nourishing space to be in. And I was like, well, what if I start, writing articles, and I sort of just start expressing? And then it was like, it kind of just took off from there. And I'd been thinking about a book, but nothing tangible had happened. I'd been very distracted by writing articles, and because that kind of has this sort of almost like an addictive rush, writing an article, and you're getting this immediate feedback, like you're pitching a story, and then an editor's engaging with you about it, and then, it's being published online or in a publication and there's like this immediate thing. Whereas finally, when I was visiting my parents in the city and my mother's book group was going in the next room, and I went into my childhood bedroom, and it was, I was sort of just in there. I don't even know what I was doing. I was just sort of taking a moment to myself, and I heard the first lines of her voice, which are the first lines of the book. And I just let them keep guiding me. So it wasn't kind of like the decision came when it was about, okay, where is this voice taking me? I think this is a book. The kind of the choice to start then occurred because it was like, well, I needed to keep choosing it if it was going to be born in the world, and I had to keep committing to it and creating space for it in my life. And that's a whole part of the process that takes enormous courage, because you're kind of, especially compared to writing articles, it was like I was in the abyss. And I mean, I guess it would be compared to in most jobs where you kind of get immediate feedback. And I mean, perhaps it'll be different as I write more books or whatever, but it's like this first one, it was like, I tend to write really imagining that it will reach people. I'm not someone who sort of just does it just cause, and then, I don't know if it'll get anywhere. I'm quite ambitious. So I'm like, if I'm going to commit to this, I really want it to reach people. So I kind of kept committing to that. But at the same time, it requires a lot of faith. And it kind of vibrates at a very different frequency from, the immediacy of writing articles and stuff. And so it was about continuing to commit to that and to let it guide me. So, I don't know if that's not a very succinct answer as to where it's all started, but, there are probably no real succinct answers to anything in life. So I hope I'm taking you on a fun adventure. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Tracy. Look at all these beautiful comments. Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, beautiful. Oh, yeah. Lovely. Sorry, this is not hugely engaging, me reading the comments, your beautiful comments. But Wendy said, I've long been very interested in autism and the different levels, meaning and effects on the person. What I've read is often written by others and not the actual person who's autistic. Yeah, well, that's a really interesting thing. I think it's very powerful for, I guess that's the whole own voices movement in lots of ways, for those stories to come out. I mean, I kind of have a belief that a good story is a good story, no matter who writes it, but it's kind of powerful if there's a whole, dare I use the word, spectrum, if there's a whole spectrum of ways of telling a story, or alongside the Rain Mans, that there is something like A Bit of a Room Called Earth as well, and something written by an actual neurodiverse person alongside someone else's interpretation of a neurodiverse person. That's the ideal thing. I don't think one should necessarily exclude the other, but it's important that they stand in their own right together, which is what I hope that the book can do, as well as just be an adventure for you all to go on inside the mind of this really magical woman on her night, during her night in Melbourne on Christmas Eve. Hello, Joy Bell. Looking forward to reading. I've worked with, oh, that's lovely. Yes. Well, I hope that it's illuminating and exciting to see, people on the spectrum celebrated in this way, and that it can open up beautiful things for those off the spectrum as well, for all the reasons I've talked about. I think autistic people are very powerful like that and can really open things up for everybody in a whole multitude of ways. So, this has been so lovely with you all. You've had such beautiful, comments and everything. I feel very, very nurtured by this. And I hope that if you pick up the book, that you go on a ride with it, that it feels intimate and, invigorating, and all the things that it felt writing it. It was such a joy. Like, once I could sort of commit to it and have faith in it and in myself and in the process of writing, it's just been, a process of real love and care, even working with all the editors and publishers, in different parts of the world. It seems to be speaking to lots of different kinds of people too. So I hope that you enjoy it. And, thank you, Lynn. I won't know how to say your name. Is it Ilona Young? Thank you. But yeah, it's been lovely being here with you all. And if you pick it up, enjoy it. Thank you all for a great night. Have a beautiful evening. Mwah! Bye for now.